This podcast is brought to you by Craft Beer and Brewing Magazine for those that love to make and drink great beer. Learn more online or subscribe at beerandbrewing.com or find us on social media at Craft Beer Brew. Welcome to the Craft Beer Brewing Podcast. This week's episode feels extra special in that it's a conversation I've wanted to bring to the podcast for years now. Gabe Fletcher, founder of Anchorage Brewing in Anchorage, Alaska, has built a reputation for brewing creatively across the spectrum, and his hustle and figuring out ways to connect his little small craft brewery in Anchorage to the bigger world of craft beer is just unparalleled. We've got a whole story about that in the Brewing Industry Guide if you want to check that out. From mixed culture, farmhouse style beers to hazy IPAs and big barrel-aged stouts and barley wines, he of course runs the gamut. And Anchorage is one of a very, very small number of breweries to score more than one perfect 100 score in Craft Beer and Brewing Magazine. But Gabe doesn't love the pressure of speaking in front of crowds, even if they're just a listening audience, and has turned me down a few times now when I've brought up the subject of a podcast. Of course, we've talked a bunch over the years, and earlier this year we talked again for a Brewer's Perspective story on brewing barley wine in the April-May 2022 issue of Craft Beer and Brewing Magazine. But I recorded the conversation, not intending it for anything other than a transcription, but the audio quality and content was pretty good, and I thought maybe one day it'll make sense to release it. Anyway, earlier this week I saw Anchorage had announced the release of 2022 A Deal with the Devil Barleywine, and that jogged my memory. So I reached out to Gabe to get his permission to share this interview. And that's what I've got coming up for you today. But first, for nearly 30 years, G&D Chillers has set the mark for quality equipment you can rely on. G&D stands above the rest as the only chiller manufacturer that engineers your glycol piping for free. G&D also stands alone as the only chiller manufacturer with an in-house team of installers and engineers with 30 years of real-world field labor experience in breweries, wineries, and distilleries. Contact the Total Glycol System Design experts today at gdchillers.com. Also, are you ready to brew like a pro? ProBrew has the equipment, systems, and technology to take your brewery to the next level. Check out www.probrew.com for info on patented ProCarb inline carbonation technology, ProFill rotary filling and seaming can fillers, the Alchemator inline alcohol separation system, 7 to 50 barrel brew houses, and more. ProBrew, a subsidiary of Technoblend, now a ProMock brand, offers the craft beer industry innovative solutions to help you brew like a pro. Go to www.probrew.com for more info. And now, of course, let's jump into my conversation with Gabe about brewing barley wine and, of course, barrel-aged barley wine. Gabe.
Hey, how's it going?
Good. How are you doing?
Oh, I got COVID.
Oh, shit, man. Oh.
Is this your first COVID interview?
I won't have to tell anybody. This is no one's going to hear this. They're just going to read the story that comes from it. So
no, I think you should say it. This is my first COVID.
First COVID interview. No, we're all feeling it here. I haven't come down with it yet, but of the folks in our office, 5 of us work out of the office full time. 4 have come down with COVID over the last 2 weeks. And, so we're about 80%, and I'm the only one who hasn't had it yet. So I'm just counting the days. I know it's coming. How does it feel? Sucks?
Oh yeah, but I'm almost happy I got it, honestly.
Well, so what I wanted to talk about on this is, we do Brewers Perspectives, kind of stories, basically in your words, and for each issue on, whatever we're focusing on. Obviously we're doing barley wine in the next issue. And I thought, if I were a brewer, who would I want to read a brewer's perspective from on barley wine? And, I think it's obvious. Yeah. Most people would love to hear from you on brewing barley wine.
We'll see.
I don't know, man. You've been brewing it for a long time and doing it really well for a long time. A friend of mine, I don't know, maybe a couple months ago, had a bottle of the double oaked vanilla It was just spectacular. I don't know. I'm curious about this magic that you put into it, because there is something that's, especially in this current kind of environment where everyone's making barley wine very sweet, just to appease the sweet tooth of that certain consumer for it. There's still just a nice balance to the way that you approach it, where it's sweet and it's going to make people happy that want to drink that kind of thing, but at the same time it doesn't feel like this kind of sickly, overly sweet thing that becomes unpleasant to drink. So, but maybe first we just talk a little bit about your background with barley wine, and I know it's something you brewed before Anchorage, and have some history with it, and just curious, like where'd you find those initial inspirations, and what were those things that you looked at, and even trying to think about barley wine as a style?
Yeah, I think, it obviously started back at my first brewing job was Midnight Sun Brewing Company.
Yep.
And that was back in 1998. And I was 21 years old. And when I first got on there, they had just brewed the first batch of Arctic Devil barley wine, and within a year and a half of me being there, I became head brewer, and just sort of took the bull by the horns and decided I was going to do my own thing, and I was smarter than I thought, and made a lot of mistakes along the way, but I always had this way of always trying to go big with things, and trying to figure out how to make those beers work. And obviously it didn't always work out, but I think from the failures come successes. And
what would you think was an early failure? What'd you do wrong that you later learned you did wrong?
there's lots of things over the years with barley wines. I actually struggled with them a lot. They've always been tricky to ferment, and I'm always trying to figure out new ways to ferment them. And I've tried feeding them. I think that's been my most successful way, is instead of just hitting it all with, or hitting the batch with just a big punch of yeast,
right?
And this 37 Plato wort. I'll do like a starter, like a 15 barrel starter, but I'll have like a 30 barrel pitch in there. And then I'll brew the first batch onto that, which, let's say it's like 8 barrels of beer or something like that. But by the next day, that yeast pitch is already up to a 60 barrel pitch, because it'll double the cell count by the next day.
Right. And
so you're putting basically, 8 barrels of 37 Plato wort onto a 60 barrel pitch of active yeast. It's like it's ready for that big hit of sugar.
Right.
And then it just takes off hot and heavy. And by the next day, it's already dropped, probably 12 points. And so now you're looking at a 25 Plato beer, or whatever the math is on it.
Right.
And then you brew your second batch onto it. And then that instantly dilutes your starting, Plato.
Right.
I don't know what the difference is, but it's always a little bit different every time. But I think that just puts a lot less pressure on the yeast.
Right.
Doing it that way.
Oh, that makes sense.
So,
and I mean, it's you're right. That's not an awkward brewing technique. Everybody's, bring that now in stouts in the same kind of way.
Yep. But I was doing that a long time ago.
Yeah.
And
when you said feeding, my initial thought was you're not doing it brewery style and just adding extra fermentables that haven't gone through.
No. No. Everyone's myth of Arctic Devil with a change, or a Deal with the Devil with a change. One of the other beers that people always talk about, and I'm surprised that people still talk about it, honestly, is and I'm sure you've heard of people talking about that beer before, but that was another sort of barley wine S beer, and we use Belgian yeast and also American yeast, and tried to sort of blend dark strong ale with barley wine.
Right.
So that was kind of a neat experiment that I didn't expect to turn out as well as it did.
Mm-hmm. You ever use enzymes to keep the fermentation rolling through the high gravity stuff?
I have. I've tried this HA18 yeast recently.
Yeah.
And I haven't been real happy with the esters that come out of it.
Yeah.
It gives this really strange sort of character. I'm not sure what it is, but I stopped using it. I turned a couple people onto it, and they were using it and stuff. But I kind of liked it at first, but then I used it in stouts before, and it doesn't seem to go off the same sort of odd ester character.
Yeah.
That it does in a barley wine.
What is it? Just because there's the roast character of a stout might make it less visible, or do you think there's something else?
It could be, yeah. I think there's just less to hide there.
Yeah.
You got all these different kind of grains and roasty characters, and I think stouts hide sweetness better than barley wines do.
Yeah. Let's take a quick break before we continue the conversation. Supply chain challenges are here to stay for a while, so why not trust the experts to handle freight for your ingredients? Old Orchard has partnered with a leading logistics firm in the craft beverage industry to transport your craft concentrate blends. When you order 2 pails or more of concentrate from Old Orchard, you qualify for freight quotes from various carriers and can stay up to date on the status of your shipment. To get started on a freight quote for craft concentrates today, head over to oldorchard.com/brewer. Also looking for a good lager yeast, Fermentation, the obvious choice for beverage fermentation, provides brewers large and small with the most complete portfolio of dry lager yeast available anywhere. To learn more about how Fermentation can improve the quality of your fermentation and for the latest on their exciting new product releases, visit fermentis.com. And now, back to barley wine. Is there a specific yeast that you use, or are you using just typical West Coast Chico?
Originally, it was like Y Scottish Ale yeast, so it's whatever BSI's version of that is.
Yeah.
I think it's BSI 28 or something like that.
Yeah.
But it's their Scottish Ale yeast.
Oh, Scottish Ale, okay.
That's the one I've always used, and it's just a really strong fermenter, and it does kick off a little bit of fruity character, but I think that lends to the beer, over that long aging period.
Sure. How about malt?
Malt.
And again, I guess as I'm thinking about this, I mean, we could think about it in terms of, do you only make barrel aged barley wine at this point, or do you make non-barrel aged? Because I imagine that approaches to these could be a little bit different.
Yeah, I mean, the only time I'd ever make a non-barrel aged barley wine would be like an American style.
Yeah.
And I've done that before, and they're great. They just don't have the same complexities, and then they don't lend to barrel aging either.
Right.
So it's like aging a triple IPA in a barrel, kind of.
Right.
It doesn't really ring the same, but malt wise, everyone knows English, Maris Otter or any of those kind of 4 malted 2 rows, keeping it simple, not putting a ton of different grains in, but that's just the way I do it, though. That doesn't mean it can't be done, another way. It's just the way I've always done it. I've always kept it real simple.
Yeah.
one or two grains is it, and a lot of it.
1 or 2 grains.
Mm-hmm.
That's cool. And just so we're clear, we're not pushing this as the only way to do it. This is all we want is your way of doing it. That's what makes this cool. Doesn't mean anyone else is wrong. It just means this is the way you do it. So
yeah.
But one or 2 grains, huh?
Yep. I'm sure you can make an awesome barley wine with like Great Western two-row as well.
Mm-hmm.
But you might have to get creative. Like maybe you do like a single decoction mash or something like that to try and richen those melanoidins,
right?
And get more malt character out of the malt is maybe a way to do it if you can't get maris otter or you don't want to spend that much money on maris otter because it's probably 3 times the price or something.
Yeah. Although I guess if you're going to put it in a barrel and go through that whole process,
yeah,
I guess you can't be too price sensitive.
Yeah, just use the good stuff.
Yeah,
But that's one thing I was just thinking about the other day. Actually, was starting to try and do single decoction mashes on some of these barley wine mashes, just to see what sort of complexities I can add to it, because it seems like it. I don't know why I never have, but it seems like it would add a lot, because you think even just in we do it on our like Czech tills and stuff, and adds like a really nice malty character to the beer.
Sure.
And you'd think doing it, you get the whole mallow reaction. You're doing that already by boiling it for hours on end.
Right.
But, I think if you boiled some of the grain and then, mixed it and, just did a single infusion, like dough in it, 148 and, let it rest for whatever, an hour, and then take off, you'd have to do the math on the ratio, but,
right.
A third of the mash or whatever, enough to bring it up to 170 degrees when you bring it back, mix it, and then and let it rest, and then do your boil off and your whole run off after that. But that's something that I've actually been wanting to try, and people want to give it a shot. I think it'd be cool.
Sure. But you don't find yourself doing that right now using maris otter, because
I've never done it, and it's literally because I never even thought about doing it before. But
right.
when you called me, I've been doing this for so long. It's almost like I'm on autopilot sometimes.
Right.
I put some thought into it and stuff, but it's almost second nature now. And,
right.
And these kind of beers. And when you told me that you're gonna do this interview with me, I was like, what else could I add to it? And then I started thinking about different ways of brewing it and stuff like that. And then kind of got my creative juices going. So
That's good. I'm glad I can contribute in some positive way to this.
So I'm gonna give that a shot here pretty soon.
That makes sense. When you choose 1 or 2 grains, like one is your maris otter base malt. Well, for a second grain, where do you typically
just some kind of crystal malt?
Yeah,
and it's only just to add like a little bit of depth character. But you could go anywhere. You could use, really high crystal malt, like, 180 or 220, or, you could put I could see people putting like biscuit malt in there, or, special B, or, some kind of characters we give, or, malts that give out sort of raisiny characters just to sort of accentuate that. And I've always liked that kind of character in barley wine.
Typically, roughly speaking, what's your ratio of that specialty malt to base malt?
It's pretty small, maybe like 3% or something like that.
Yeah, you're right. That's small.
Yeah, maybe 5%. But I would honestly have to go back and.
No, that's okay. We just talk about it in rough terms.
Yeah. Yeah, probably maybe closer to 5, but it's very small. It's not like it's adding a ton of. It's just a nuance,
Right.
It's not adding. I wouldn't say a ton of color or anything like that. I think you're getting most of your color just from the boil.
Yeah. That was my next question. You do get a good kind of chestnut color out of that, and you're saying that is boil driven more than specialty malt driven?
For sure, yeah. Maris Otter on its own is just dark. The wort coming out is not. I wouldn't say super dark, but it's definitely a lot darker than regular 2-row. So
yeah,
especially when you're using it, at that volume.
Right.
I don't care what like brew house you have, unless it's like 100 or a 50 barrel brew house or something like that. I always put as much. That's like if anybody asks me about a recipe, I just say put as much grain as you can fit into your mash tun, and that's your malt bill. You know what I mean?
Right.
So that's your barley wine.
Work from that, and then you'll get your finished volume later on, working backwards from that.
Yep. Don't sparge, or if you do, sparge like a barrel, a half barrel or a barrel or something like that.
Yeah.
But, very little sparge. Because anything that you're sparging, it's just upping your boil time.
Right. Oh, you got to take it back off.
All you're doing is diluting what you already have there. So as much grain as you can fit. If you got a 10 barrel system,
right,
fill it up till it's about to come out the door. Like that's the measurement.
Right.
That's how I've always done it.
This new generation of oversized mash tuns to brew stouts and barley wines are making a lot more sense these days. So yeah,
that's what we have.
Yeah. Yeah. All right, so using 1 or 2 grains, just piling as much in there as you can, not sparging, hugely inefficient, kind of thing. When it comes to hops, imagine there's some in there, but that they're obviously not the star of the show.
Yeah, we're, I don't like to go over 30 IBUs.
Okay.
So it's really low. And I do put, you put a little in at the end. But that's it. Very little.
Yeah, yeah. And variety doesn't matter as much to you as you're just trying to find some soft bitterness there.
I honestly like something with some fruit in it.
Yeah.
So I would suggest going with something with some sort of fruity character.
Huh.
I think those fruit characters lend to the end product. Because they accentuate like all those dark fruit characters you're getting from, the fermentation and the grains and all that. Though it would be subtle, I just think it's a nice blend instead of just relying on, sweet, syrupy grain character,
That's fascinating. It does seem like, it would work with those esters, right? That the fermentation will kick off and add something to it. Is there, what kind of fruity character you find? Are you looking for more citrus, more tropical, or is this, do you go different ways for different batches?
More tropical.
Cool.
We've always used Galaxy hops.
And your barley wine. Boy, that's efficient.
Well, the funny thing is I was using Galaxy hops before they're super popular.
Right. No, I remember that. I remember farmhouse beers from you with Galaxy hops in them years and years ago.
Yeah, exactly. We had Galaxy hops and everything. And that's just because what I had a ton of Galaxy, and I'd get it for like $1 a pound. And I had a direct, contract with John I. House. And eventually I lost that, but so now I'm paying more, but it's fine. It's still use Galaxy hops.
Galaxy hops and barley. No, I mean that's awesome and such a fun and different, out of the norm. But if you want to know, I mean, for me, it sounds like that's one of those things that makes it an Anchorage barley wine.
Yeah, I think so. because I think most people would use like an English hop, or they would use Magnum or something really neutral that isn't really adding to the character of it. It's just balancing with a touch of bitterness.
Right. And then, something like Galaxy's also definitely got more alpha in it than, some of those British hops that people might otherwise, just lean on. So it's a little bit different approach then comparatively.
For sure. Yeah.
But 30 IBU, you're not using a ton of Galaxy hops then if that's.
No.
Yeah.
No. And then we do, we can do a little shot at the end of the boil.
Like, 5 minutes to go, 10 minutes, or are you just throwing them in a whirlpool?
Oh, just in the whirlpool.
Oh, cool. Look at that, using IPA techniques for your Barleywine. Galaxy, whirlpool hopping, man. So contemporary. I love it.
Yeah.
How long do you typically boil for?
It honestly depends on the air pressure.
Oh, okay. So it's to a certain volume or for a certain amount of boil off?
We basically boil to gravity.
Okay.
So, I can't remember which way it goes. It's either it's a high pressure day, it's a long day, or I think it's because it doesn't allow the steam to escape as easy.
Right.
And so your evaporation rate goes way down. So it can literally add like 4 hours to your day if it's a high pressure day.
Yikes.
People always talk about, I had to boil for 6 hours. I'm like, this is like the easiest day ever. You can just go do other things, and the thing's just sitting there boiling. And
as you're thinking about this, especially with the intention of putting a beer into barrels, that gravity that you're coming out with, can certainly impact the way that barrel aging piece comes. What do you typically shoot for to post fermentation gravity before you go into barrels?
Usually between 10 to 14, somewhere in there.
Okay, that's not as high as I thought it might be.
You thought it'd be like 18?
I thought it could be even higher. Yeah.
No.
Now that we have stouts and stuff going into barrels at 20 Plato plus,
Yeah. The thing is you still, even when the beer ferments down that low, you still get a ton of sweetness.
Right.
So it's not like that sweetness just goes away just because it fermented out. Even if it went down to 0, there'd still be a ton of sweetness. There was actually this one time I made this American barley wine, and I decided to try some enzymes in it, and it fermented down to 1 Plato from 28.
Damn.
And it still had sweetness and body in it.
Huh.
And, I didn't release it like that. We ended up brewing another batch without the enzymes and did a higher mash temp and tried to get the ending gravity much higher. And then we blended the two together to balance it.
Right.
But I was surprised at how, sweet it was for fermenting down that far.
Interesting. And what do you think it was that lent that? Obviously, if it's 1 Plato, it's not sugar, but it's some idea of sweetness, and then something else leaving the body into it.
Yeah, I have no idea.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not a scientist.
Hey.
I don't. I'm just one of those dumb birds.
Hey, no worries. I'm curious about it because I find the same thing in a lot of Belgian lambic, for example, or even Jester King beers, where they're like, this is a 0.999. How you got it below dry, and yet it still has some perceived sweetness to it. We have a Czech Pils that we brew called Time for a Change, and it finishes at almost 0 Plato. Yeah.
But we do a single decoction mash on it, and it still has body.
It's cool that it still works that way, and I think our brains are sensing something and about this that may not be measured as sweetness, even if it's perceived on our tongue. I mean, our brains fill in the gaps all the time. Between what something actually is and what we think it should be, based on those other sensory inputs. So no, that's pretty cool. So you go in 10 to 14, into the barrel, or they're,
the lower the better. And, we've been trying to drive that number down over the last, few years. And, now we're getting down into like the 10s and stuff. And I'm actually happier with the beer down in there.
You're training the consumer to go along with you, huh?
Oh, I don't know about that. We'll see. I said we've been trying to get the gravity down, but maybe I am training them at the same time. Who knows?
What do you think, what's the difference from your perspective between something that goes in at 10 versus something that goes in at 14?
The beer will taste better sooner. You don't have to age it for quite as long. I think one of the big tricks of, producing these beers is like double or triple oaking.
Yeah.
I don't like that beer single oaked.
Huh.
It's just okay. I think it needs more time, and the double oaking is, even if I just age it for a year, I'll age it for 6 months, and then I'll throw it into another barrel and then go for another 6 months.
When you double oak, is it oxygen pickup? Is it just barrel contact with more spirits? Is it barrel contact with more of the wood character in the barrel? What do you think it is?
I think it's all the above. It's all the above. I think it's more fresh wood on the beer. It could be more oxygen just from the transfer,
right?
And
small trace, but yeah,
trace, and then the alcohol pickup. One thing a lot of people, I think, miss is people get real excited about some of these really old barrels. And at the end of the day, there's not really a lot of character in them. They're really stripped out. All that's left in there is that spirit. And you're lucky if you get the spirit in there. Like if you can get a wet old barrel, but if you get a wet or a dry old barrel, that's like the worst.
What does a dry old barrel taste like to you?
It doesn't taste like anything. It's like, all the characters stripped out of it compared to like a younger barrel. So
right.
People probably have noticed I use a lot of double oak barrels. Like if I can get a hold of some sort of double oak barrel,
yeah,
it's the best of both worlds, because you've taken this, bourbon that's been aged for, I don't know how long, 8 years, 4 years, 6 years. And then they put it into a fresh barrel for just 1 year, and then they empty it. So you're getting like this fresh oak plus old bourbon inside of it. So it's like the best flavor combination. You get the most impact out of it.
I see what you're saying. Right. For that, there's like cask finished where they're putting bourbon in it just for a short period to finish it. That barrel becomes the most fun. Huh.
For me.
Yeah.
That's what I've noticed. But those are some of my favorite barrels to find.
As I'm thinking about it, there is a certain kind of vibrance and energy, to your barrel aged barley wines where they don't feel old and tired, and you think that double oaking has something to do with that.
The double oaking and double oak barrels.
Double oaking in
but
double.
I don't think it doesn't always have to be a double oak barrel.
Sure, sure.
We do it differently all the time. A lot of times I'll try and put it in a double oak, and then we'll add, we'll take it over into a Blanton's or a Buffalo Trace or whatever we can get our hands Weller. All of them add, awesome layers.
Right.
So I don't think there's one way to go with it, but
sure,
that's just something that I noticed about those one barrels. And then we haven't done cognac in a long time. The early versions of A Deal with the Devil were done in cognac, and I've always struggled with the quality of those barrels and having issues with them leaking, and so I sort of strayed away from them, but I've been thinking about experimenting with them again.
Yeah.
So you might see some more cognac in the future. The very first batch of The Deal with the Devil was just cognac.
Right. We'll continue the conversation in a minute, but first, with 20 years of innovation and experience, Brewmation specializes in electric, steam, and direct fire brew houses, complete cellar solutions, and automated controls for the craft brewing industry. From half-barrel to 30-barrel systems, Brewmation puts you in control to design a brewery that fits your needs and brewing style. Whether you're starting a new brewery, upgrading your cellar, or just need some parts to keep you up and running, Brewmation has you covered. Visit them at brewmation.com/cbbpod to get started. Also, as craft beer's most trusted point-of-sale system, Arrived is the mobile, all-in-one solution you need to decrease service friction and increase guest satisfaction. With a full suite of craft-specific features, no contracts, and no monthly fees, Arrived provides the necessary tools to help your brewery grow. Go to arrived.com /CBB to set up a free customized demo. That's Arrived, ARRYVED.com /CBB. Remember, there is no I in Arrived. Now, back to the conversation. How much does, as you build this stock, I know you're putting a lot of stuff back into barrels. How many beers start with the finish line in mind versus how many beers start with let's put some stock back and then taste and see what we can build from that,
I think most of them do not go in as, maybe some, like we make a beer called Wendigo.
Yeah.
That's a
black
barley wine. And it's double oaked. And I love that beer. It's a very simple recipe too. That one is one that goes in. We have a plan and we execute it. And then,
right.
But the deal with the devil has been kind of changing and tweaking for years, but it's never been the recipe. The recipe's always been the same. It's just been processes.
Yeah.
So I think we usually almost nothing goes in with like this is because we can't always say, oh, the beer's going to turn out this way, or I might be inspired by something and want to try something new, or so I always keep everything kind of open and just kind of roll with it.
Yeah. No, I mean, it makes sense. Like you have access to some new barrels that come along and, taste stuff and figure out what you want to put into it, keep things going. I mean, right. But I'm curious about different sources and barrels could all end up in a specific blend of any batch of the Deal with the Devil that you release. And, it's not all going to be one thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And, sometimes we'll pull from, generally they're from the same year. Up to this point, yeah, it's always been the same year's release.
Yeah.
So like when we brew a batch, we generally throw it into different barrels or all one set of barrels, and then we double oak it into something else, and then even triple oak it into something else, and that takes about 2 years to do triple oak.
Yeah.
And, but we have to we hold some back in, kegs as well. So let's just say we're going to do a double oak batch, we fill all the barrels up that we normally do. And then, you're going to have loss on all those barrels for that batch. So when we go to double oak, we'll top off the barrels, or we'll transfer it into the empty barrels, but we'll top off from the next barrel. So all the new barrels are totally full to the top.
Mm.
And then at the end, we're going to end up with, maybe like 15 gallons or even, 2 kegs of beer that we couldn't use.
Won't fill in an entire cask. Yeah.
Yeah. And then we'll set that aside, let that age in stainless. And then when we go to triple oak, we'll top all that off, and then we'll take those 2 kegs and we'll use that as our top off.
Well, that makes sense.
Because that's one of the hard parts about doing double, triple oak, and you have to get the barrel full. So
right, so that it doesn't end up too oxidized.
Yeah, for sure.
How much will a barrel lose over the year of aging?
Gallons? Oh man, I don't know exactly.
Percentage wise, roughly, I don't know. 3%,
maybe
4%.
Sometimes more. I usually just look into the barrel and I'm like, oh, we lost about 5 gallons or something like that.
Wow.
This is kind of a crazy story, and I don't know if I should even let it out, but I'm gonna. I'll tell you.
We can decide later whether it makes it into the story or not.
So, one of our most famous batches was Deal with the Devil. I think it's batch 4. And it was from batch 2 or something like that. And I threw it into a whiskey barrel. And it was when we first started, so I was doing like Brett everything, Everything was Brettanomyces, except for this Barleywine. I was like, I'm going to throw some Brett in here and just see what happens. And then I let that cask age for 2 years, I think.
Yeah.
And I just forgot about it. I just left it in there. And we were moving into our new facility when I found it. And I mean, I always knew it was back there, but I was just like, I'm just going to let it do its thing.
Right.
And I opened the bunghole, just to look in there and see, and there's no pellicle, and the bread didn't do anything to it.
Huh.
But it aged beautifully, and we packaged it, and that's the one batch that everyone tries to buy for like $2,500 or whatever. But I was putting Brett cultures into it. So
I think you've told me. I think you've told me that before.
Did I?
I vaguely recall that. I haven't
Maybe
shared
I
it. I didn't share it with anybody, but yeah, that's funny.
I don't think we ever let it out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hey.
But yeah, kind of funny. So I know there's some people that maybe heard about it, so everyone thinks that I actually use Brettanomyces in the Deal with the Devil, I think. So there's a lot of people that think that.
Well, you wouldn't be historically incorrect in the history of old ale, stock ale, and barley wine, at least,
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. Now we've had a few for this upcoming issue where folks have been intentionally adding Brett to them, and can make for some interesting beers.
Yeah.
2 more things I want to talk about. One is adding adjuncts, which is something you've started to do in a very subtle way, especially things like vanilla. I know you're not looking to make pastry barley wines. You're looking for barrel expression primarily, but this vanilla addition and using very subtle kind of pieces there, maybe even coconut here and there. Talk to me about using adding some of these ingredients to help finish certain barley wines.
It's kind of slippery slope, and people are pretty sensitive about it. They're like, why you can't put adjuncts in barley wines, and they get really upset about it. And so I was kind of dipping my toe in it, and at first I was going to do a coconut one, and I realized how much beer I was going to lose from the coconut. And I was like, no, I can't do it.
Yeah,
it's too big of a loss. I mean, the absorption from coconut is just insane.
Yeah.
Like on 40 barrels of like a big beer, we would lose 10, like 25% absorption.
Yeah, miserable.
Just because of the sheer volume of coconut we're using. But I decided to try the vanilla, but we didn't do very much. It was, I think, like a 1/4 pound per barrel. And we just left it in until, we kept a real close eye on it because I didn't want it to take over the beer. I just wanted it to be like a subtle character, almost like it's building upon the vanilla character from the oak or something like that.
Right.
So I didn't want it to take over the beer, just to add some complexity.
Sure.
And try something new and have something for for people to try a new variant of the Devil Devil.
Rather than going for a full-on marshmallow, just looking, to highlight that. I think there's a piece of subtlety there when you're echoing, especially with vanilla and coconut flavors that already exist there due to the barrel aging process. And I think it becomes less about making the ingredient the star and more about highlighting some of that barrel character, just putting a point on it.
But since then, we've done beers where, we have stock of all these different kinds of stouts and barley wines and stuff. And lately we've been doing some barley wine imperial stout blends with adjuncts. And those have kind of allowed us to sort of amp up, some of those characters.
Let's talk about black barley wine for a second, and then I think that's probably then I'll ask you about finishing and carbonation at the end there. Just kind of curious where that goes. But black barley wine, with Wendigo in particular, certainly it's something we've been seeing more of over the last 3 or 4 years. For you, what are the differences with that?
Well, it's a smaller beer. It's, around 32 Plato. And it's literally 2 ingredients again. It's, just maris otter and cinnamon.
And then just cinnamon, just for color, really.
Yeah, it's just like making a Schwartz beer or something like that.
Right.
But it's barley wine. And, it does add some character for sure. There's, the slightest little bit of roast. Sort of character, but it's not like it's totally neutral. But other than that, it's very simple. And it's recipe, and we sort of, it's funny. Like 32 Plato is so easy to ferment. It's like
all relative, right?
It's a super easy beer to make. We don't got to worry about anything. I do think when people get into like, I made this 45 Plato barley wine, I'm like, I don't know. I think it's too much. I think it's, I guess I haven't tried one that tastes good yet, but I think there's a limit to how much, how big of a beer you can make with barley wines.
If I'm reading you right, what you're saying is that obviously bigger isn't always better, but that it throws off the kind of balance equation. You're already picking up a bunch of alcohol from the spirit barrel aging process. And I know some of yours get into the 16 plus, range just without having to brew them into that kind of range. If you try to start even bigger, then, you get into 20 plus, and that just sounds gross.
Well, I also think that some people that are trying to brew a beer that big think it's just going to ferment out, and they find out that it's going to stop at like 24 Plato or something like that.
Right.
And then I've had lots of people send me emails saying, "Hey, I tried to brew this beer," or I even tried to brew a beer at 37 Plato and it just crapped out on me. I'm like, yeah, I know, it's hard.
So your big key on fermenting is yeast health, overpitching like a motherfucker, and basically brewing in 2 batches so that you're stepping up your yeast along the way.
And using oxygen both times.
Oxygen both times. Okay.
Yeah, and that's only overnight. I wouldn't wait like 2 days or anything like that.
Right. In terms of finishing, barley wine gets away with being, lower carbonated than most other styles, kind of, fits that savoriness of it. Where do you tend to aim for?
We always hit 2.2 volumes. That's kind of, I find when people try and get them too high, it's, the fizziness really messes with the mouthfeel.
Sure.
And then too low, it's just flat. I know some people have been releasing a few like flat still barley wines, and they're okay. I think Corey did the best job.
Yeah.
But I think the beer, it has to be a freaking awesome beer to begin with.
Right.
If it's not an awesome beer, it's like it's gonna make it even worse. So I think you do need a little bit of carbonation in there just to kind of. And the 2.2, I feel like adds that like a really creamy texture to the beer.
I'm still gonna get some head off of it, and it'll still be yeah. Any other for other folks out there brewing these, any other hints, tips, tricks, pro approach?
Don't try and go too big just because you want to make a big beer, unless you can ferment it out,
Right.
Because once it gets stuck, it's almost impossible to. So there are some tricks to getting it unstuck, and maybe this is something that could help some people, because there's a ton of people that when they try and ferment out a Barleywine at 37 Plato or higher, or even a little bit lower, they get stuck at like 20 or 24 Plato. And one way to help that is to just off of one of your other batches that you're brewing, like another beer,
right?
That's maybe similar in color, not too far off. Is get a 1 barrel starter going, and then get another big yeast starter going, and use some of that. I've used some of that HA18 before just to help with this.
Yeah.
And so I'll use, the yeast starter like I would normally start the beer off, and then on a 1 barrel pitch, and then I'll add a couple bricks of that HA18, and then transfer the whole beer on top of that the next day when it's like just fermenting like crazy.
Right.
And a lot of times it'll take it down to where it needs to go.
Huh.
So if you get in trouble anyways.
I think I've got all that I need.
God damn it, I made it through.
We made it through. Yeah.
Oh, man. I was nervous in the beginning.
Really?
I don't know why.
You what?
I said, I don't know why I get that way. I just do.
One of these days.
That's why I hate doing interviews, like live interviews where they're recording me.
Right.
Just like start sweating. I'm like, oh, Jesus.
I guess that's the key. I have been recording this whole thing. I should have told you I was doing that, but maybe
no,
I should.
I knew you were recording the whole thing. It's just like if you were to do this live, I would have been like, oh, fuck, I sound like an idiot. One day
we'll get it. One day you'll feel comfortable and we can do the podcast episode that you've told me you'll never do.
Yeah, right. Okay.
One day. No, like I said, no one will hear this audio. I'll turn this. I just like to record stuff because then I can transcribe it and I can make sure I get all the words right. And if I try to type this stuff while we're talking, then I lose track of where our conversation is. So
that'd be really hard. Yeah.
Well, hey, I appreciate it. Thanks for giving me time, and I hope you feel better and get through COVID shittiness. It's sucks.
I'm almost there. Yeah. I think I'll be back on Thursday. So.
Okay.
Cool.
All
right.
Awesome.
Yeah. We'll talk to you later.
Thanks, Gabe. Okay. Bye.
Bye.
I hope you've enjoyed this unusual episode of the podcast, and big thanks to Gabe for letting me share it with you. A Deal with the Devil Barleywine is one of the best beers I've ever had the pleasure of drinking, and this glimpse into Gabe's brewing approach is eye-opening. If you're a subscriber to Craft Beer Brewing, dive into those digital archives on our app or website and dig up the homebrew scaled recipe for A Deal with the Devil in the April-May 2022 issue. It's definitely not to be missed. And thanks for listening along with us. For nearly 30 years, G&D Chillers has set the mark for quality equipment you can rely on. ProBrew has the equipment, systems, and technology to take your brewery to the next level. Think outside the puree box with Old Orchard's craft concentrate blends. Fermentis provides brewers with the most complete portfolio of dried lager yeast anywhere. Brewmation puts you in control to design a brewery that fits your needs and brewing style. An arrived mobile point of sale powers places with personality. Of course, go to beerandbrewing.com, click on that subscribe button, let us know this content matters to you, and of course, get into that all access subscription tier so that you'll get first crack at tickets to our 10th anniversary Brewers Retreat next year at Russian River in Santa Rosa, California, it's going to be something not to be mixed. Thanks for checking out this episode. Hey, if you want to learn more about Anchorage, go check them out on the socials, Anchorage Brewing, or go visit them on the web at anchoragebrewing.company. Cheers. This podcast is brought to you by Craft Beer and Brewing Magazine for those that love to make and drink great beer. Learn more online or subscribe at beerandbrewing.com or find us on social media at Craft Beer Brew.